The first batch of folks are in and live for our first whiskey advent tasting. I know there's still people trickling in. This is awesome. We got a good turnout for the first night. Evan and Harmony came equipped with Santa hats. I apparently didn't get the memo. Also, I don't think they make them large enough for my head. So I'm just gonna go with this. You guys, I'm assuming, well, Harmony, I know you've got samples. Evan, you probably already opened yours, but I wanted to ceremoniously open my This Is Not an Advent Calendar box tonight. It's fresh, uncracked, untapped, as it were.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's perfect for YouTube because unboxing videos are hot. So
Are they? Okay.
yeah,
So, like, is there a way that I need to do this to get people the most excited?
yeah, I think we need like a top-down view, just on the box itself. And then you got to add in some ASMR with like a good microphone so that they get the stereo of the crinkle on the plastic.
Is that enough? Is that enough sound for you?
No, your booming voice unfortunately just covers up the crinkle.
All right, and then I gotta cut the one box out of here so that I can start tasting one. Oh, all right. And I can see mine's not been tampered with. That's quite helpful. Feeling positive about things. So guys, Evan, we're joined by a third tonight. I think every other time we've done these, it's just been the two of us.
Yeah, yeah, it typically has been. More the merrier this time of year and for this kind of thing though. Um, it's always fun, especially on these shorter 5 dram tastings, to get a few more comments in. And Harmony is a good one to do this since she did put most of these together.
Like
This
literally
time
did
she gets
the
to,
lion's
yep,
share of the labor. Uh,
exactly.
Also fair to note, people are probably getting tired of us, or at least the jokes that we rehash over and over again. So to get
That's
some
right.
new material, that's always good too. So I'm still unboxing. I'm pulling my samples out. There was a little note. I'm sure everybody's seen the note. Harmony was mad because I think we do the first boxes without the notes.
Yeah, we
Or
built 100 without notes. And I think like a month before, I was like, are we doing scrolls? And we're like, no, it's tastings. And then you got the idea of like, but it's tradition. So we're going to do it like a week after they were all built.
Yeah,
you got to be able to reserve the right to change your mind about stuff, even if
yeah,
it creates extra work. Also, incidentally, if you didn't get the discount card, 90% of the full Monties should have had a discount card plus, but we might have missed a handful of them. So if you didn't, we got you. You're good. But yeah, it was chaos. I mean, we built them in our busiest month of tastings. Evan was ready to murder me, and Harmony was
yeah.
moving at a speed that no other human, no other mortal could match, to get them across the line. So, but here we are.
Yeah, we made it.
We did. Evan, I mean, Harmony might have done the labor, but you did the research. Do you want to get us started here?
Yeah,
Do you want to
yeah.
talk about?
Harmony's the brawn and I'm the brains, I guess, at this point. Because I'm definitely not the brawn. So as we do every year, we kind of, well, I wouldn't say we do it last minute, but it's been a lot more exciting to do since we've in the last 2 years where we've had the chance to really open up and truly curate a whiskey list for the calendar. So there's a bit more of the discussion that goes into it beyond us finding out from agents what we have access to and from other distilleries and such. We definitely stick to a lot of exclusives, but we also try and add in some stuff that we have become truly excited about and truly excited for over the year to try and give it another showcase. So that's especially for me, right where we're starting, with whiskey number 1, which is typically also sort of like sets the tone, as Andrew puts it, for the rest of the calendar. I really pushed to get a signatory, a bottling, and this specific signatory bottling in just because I absolutely love this bottling of Highland Park and the previous one that we had in a different cask.
Well, and I think you know, to that point, like when we've done this, even when we did the 50 mils, we always wanted to start with something that kind of signified this was different from your average advent
Mhm.
calendar or your average tasting. And with that Orkney, I mean, we could easily have sold all of that over the last month. It would be gone. But we like to have some things in here that are special that maybe you might have missed, maybe you might not have caught the first time around. And we've held back some bottles. So even though I believe it's archived on our website, this is the one thing we didn't get around to today, Evan, that I forgot to mention, but we probably didn't realistically have time for because it was a busy day anyway, was to get set so we could offer the last handful of bottles we have of this to
Yeah,
anyone on tonight's tasting.
yeah,
But
that might have to be an email, Evan or Andrew or Harmony at the end of the tasting.
probably better to Harmony because I'm flying to Kelowna to do a tasting tomorrow night. I think you're hockey dad.
Yeah, I'm off till Sunday, so.
And then, yeah, so we'll get to that. We'll get to that maybe a little later. But if you haven't noticed, or if you're not familiar, if you've never done the advent calendar before, there's an Instagram post that goes out every day. There's a blog post that Evan puts a lot of time and effort into, even though we are doing these as a set of 5 tastings. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy that. Whether you join us for the tastings or whether you do them on your own or maybe a bit of both, that's all great. Before we get
Mhm.
rolling, Evan, I think we got one last thing we should mention today because those who got the email will know we just dropped a whole bunch of new tastings.
Yeah,
And I just want to quickly highlight them because there's a couple that are pretty cool that aren't going to last very long. So if you'll bear with me while we're waiting for the last few stragglers, and then we'll get going on the first whiskey. The first of our 2025 tastings are live, including a 25th anniversary old malt cask tasting. What do we have after that? Scotch Malt Whiskey Society virtual and in store. There's an Octomore tasting, including all of batch 14 and batch 15. We're going to pit them against each other and then 2 18-year-olds. There is a Kilchoman tasting with a set of 6 Kilchoman's that were originally only offered to people who bought them when the distillery opened 20 years ago. They're 6 10-year-old casks, 6 different cask types. And then the 16-year-old Kilchoman and the 15-year-old single cask sold to Alberta for the 20th anniversary. We actually added 30 more spots to that tasting because it's sold out effectively today. If you're in town, there's our ever popular Burns Whiskey Festival, Blinded by Bourbon. There's a few of these we need to get tasting or photos up for. Intro to Whiskey. We've got a Japanese tasting celebrating Nika's 90th anniversary. An Ardbageddon of kind of cool and rare and limited Ardbegs, some of which haven't even been offered for retail yet. And then a Bowmore tasting pitting the new Sherry Oak lineup against the core range. So I don't want to waste any more of anyone's time with that, but they're all up on our website. Evan, tell us about the Signatory Orkney and let's get some liquid on the lips here.
yeah, absolutely. So question was in there about whether we treat this as a blind tasting. We could, but I think it's just more fun. We'll do the reveal one at a time as we go through instead of running it through twice. We'll still get plenty of time to talk about what our favorites are in the lineup and revisit and compare and contrast. There will be some spoilers going through as we do it. I'm sure if you are caught up with us at this point, you probably notice there's a decent amount of peat in this first tasting, and we'll probably talk about that as we go through as well. But let's start with this Highland Park 18-year-old from Signatory. It is from a single sherry butt, and this is something we kind of picked up on over the last year. I think we had one bottling that was that came in first, and this is a second bottling of Highland Park 18 sherry from a single sherry butt at cask strength that we've gotten.
It might even
be the third. Could be. I remember tasting the previous one and being blown away by it. And as soon as that happened, I hoped that we'd get more because I wanted to put it in the calendar. We had this one in, I think not the 35th anniversary, but tasting, but another Signatory tasting. And again, this one was fantastic. So it was a fun one to write up. I have talked in the past about how the regular Highland Park 18-year-old has been sort of a perennial dram for me, and it used to be one of those benchmark whiskeys that I'd go back to time and time again. That has changed over the last probably decade or so for me, partially because of the pricing of it. And then this thing came along where it's essentially at the same price or sometimes even less expensive than the regular Highland Park 18 and at a cask strength and shows a lot of the character that I really enjoyed from the old Highland Park 18s, but at a higher strength as well. Just a great, great sherried Orkney dram.
Well, and I think what's cool to mention about this, and maybe we can get into some conspiratorial stuff, Evan, and lots of props in there in the chat about your blog, which I really wish I had the time to read through because Evan also has quite a good dry sense of humor that I'm sure trickles through that as well. But one of the things that for me, this whiskey sort of epitomizes is where the whiskey industry is at versus where it pretends to be. And that might be something you touched on, Evan, like this mystery 18-year-old sherried Highland Park that's getting sold off on condition that the bottlers can't name it. There's only one reason why they would be doing that, and it's because they're just not selling enough of it. This is bulk stock sold off, probably at a younger age, possibly then re-racked into fresh sherry butts by Signatory and left to mature for a reasonable amount of time. But these stock profiles don't come by accident. And I think the sister bottling to this, which is really interesting to talk about, is the Macallan. We frequently, and we're out of stock now, but we have another batch coming. We frequently have a batch of cask strength Macallan 18-year-old Speyside M. I'm just going to put it up on the screen. That's half the price of the Macallan 18 at 43%. And yeah, it just says Speyside 18, and in brackets it just says M. But everybody knows what this is. Everyone knows this is Macallan. There's no big secret here. And I think this is something you might even see more of at this juncture we're at in Scotch whiskey right now, where there's oversupply. Some brands got extremely greedy, pushed their prices way too high, and can't figure out how to get them back to normal.
Yeah, we're definitely at a period economically for whiskey, for official bottlings, where there's this weird kind of we may have to readjust period, but it's getting a lot of the big companies to readjust. It's going to be like pulling teeth. They're going to be the last ones to admit to themselves that they've kind of overstretched the consumer dollar. The upside of companies like Signatory and other independent bottlers is because they're looking at smaller quantities, smaller batches, and a hell of a lot less spent on advertising. They can adjust a lot quicker and often can adjust to the benefit of consumers like us as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the dangerous thing. Like if you're a big brand like Macallan and you've convinced retailers to buy your stock, put it on their shelves at these inflated prices, and consumers to buy it, you can't all of a sudden just drop your price the next year because you're going to piss off the consumer who bought it and paid more for it. You're going to piss off the retailer that's still sitting on it and hasn't sold it. Like it's actually kind of a big problem that's going to have to be sorted out. I mean, we ran into this with the Bowmore 30s that were double the price they were selling in globally in the US or Europe. And what ended up happening is in places like Ontario, where our prices were getting inflated just to keep the LCBO happy, they have these negotiating tactics where they force the producers to drop the price. So they were selling them for half what our retail was. And our wholesale was $1,000 more than what the LCBO's retail was. So there's all these things that they're going to have to figure out. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they do it. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see more and more of this unnamed, undisclosed from not just Macallan, but other distilleries starting to be pushed off on independent bottlers for consumers to buy. The good news means there's going to be some good deals out there, but they're going to be opaque. Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, this signifies, before we get to actually talking about what we taste on this, which is important, this signifies a lot of what you're talking about and is kind of a keystone example of There are, and Harmony can attest to this as well, there's plenty of Highland Park out there that's not bottled as official bottlings that are darn good whiskeys. We've got bottlings from Single Malts of Scotland. There's other signatory bottlings of Highland Park at different ages. I think we still might have a 35-year-old, if I remember correctly, from the 40th anniversary edition. I think there's some younger stuff too that in the 100 proof range
There's
that if we
also-
are out of right now, we'll still see
There's
some more.
also
Sorry.
like Whiskey Sponge has done quite a few releases over the
Yes,
last year, different styles and
absolutely.
ages too. Yeah, there's
Yep.
lots. Yeah.
So what do you guys get on the nose and palate for this guy?
It's sandy. It reminds me of like
Mhm.
maybe a beach bonfire like the next day, and there's been a little bit of the tides come in with it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a like a little bit of an edge of like brimstone and burning embers in there as well for me without going into full on sulfur notes.
Yeah. And then some like peach cobbler and like creamed honey.
Yeah. Apple pie.
Like everything for me, all your fruits have a little bit of that like creme brulee burnt sugar cooked onto it. Like someone just
Nice.
took a torch to the top of all your stone fruits.
Hmm. Craig Maddox says pipe tobacco. I think that's a good call. Um, for me, the Highland Park 12 and 18, especially, I remember, and I think I talked about it in the blog post, going to the Unicorn downtown when it was in a basement, essentially. And they used to have Highland Park 12 and 18-year-olds. This is going back 15 years ago, maybe even more. They used to have it where you could get a double of the 18 neat for like 10 or 12 bucks. Might even been 9 if you knew the manager. But um, I drank a lot of the Highland Park there because of that, and they always had this really nice apple pie, graham crumble note, a little bit of cinnamon, and then like as you were talking about with the stone fruits, the crust of the apple pie was sort of like scorched or burnt in it, and it does have that scorched sort of burnt quality to it in a nice manner.
I used to love Highland Park 18. It was one of my favorite whiskeys when I really got into whiskey. And over the last decade, kind of seeing the decline of the quality of liquid,
Mhm.
coinciding with the increase in pricing has been very frustrating. But I think one of the things that's nice, maybe not specifically about this independent bottling, but I think what I love about other independent bottlings of Highland Park is that a lot of them are American oak. And what we see from the distillery is almost exclusively sherried, and often like over the top, goopy sherried, one-dimensional, sometimes sulfured, but not all the time, not too often. But it hides the spirit. And the Highland Park spirit, I think, is one of the most interesting in the world.
Mhm.
They only use Orkney peat, and the way they do this is by blending malt from the mainland with malt that they floor malt at the distillery. And so there's things about their production process that gives it the potential to be incredible, but they're so lost in their Viking iconography and, you know, marketing BS that they've lost sight of just putting out a good product that people want. And I think this was something I was chatting about with someone the other day. It was James Bourne, and we were talking about this, about how brands got complacent when whiskey was rising because they knew people were going to buy it. If they bottled it, put it in some decent packaging, people would buy it. And that's changed. That era is over. You have to bottle something compelling. It has to be good. And I think the companies that are going to struggle are the ones that are only going to give people what they want the consumer to want. They want you to want what they want you to want, not what you want. And that's the big problem, is that they aren't bottling whiskey for the consumer, they're bottling it for themselves, and they're trying to shove down your throats what you want. And I think they've rebranded it. They've got rid of the Viking iconography because they obviously figured out that didn't work. But unless that's also coming with a drastic price decrease and a change in the cask makeup of things like the 18, like it's not going to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just shared my screen just because I've shortened, and maybe we should trademark the term Vikingography, just because Viking iconography is hard to,
Iconography. We like to
yeah,
coin words at Kensington Wine Market. We've
that's
got
right.
about a half dozen going now. Yeah, it's a tradition.
Yeah.
The palate on this is lovely. I mean, I don't want to say this is the best Highland Park I've ever had, but it is very good. It ticks all the boxes. The ABV is not too hot.
Mhm.
It's pretty tasty stuff, and certainly well worth a purchase above and before, that rune stone looking 18-year-old bottle.
So
That's
what
right.
is the price of this bottle?
It's
Does anyone
300.
remember? It's archived, so as someone
Yeah.
noted, it's archived, so we can't tell, but
300.
great price.
Yep,
I mean,
absolutely.
I I think it's a tad high, but like that's the price is the price. I mean,
Yeah.
Signatory, I think, has been very fair with their pricing over the years. So if the price is that high, it's because they had to pay X to get it in order to bottle it. Um,
Well, I think did we use this bottle in the IB versus OB head to head? I think we did.
Yeah, we did.
And
Yeah.
and I thought it showed really well. I also thought the regular 18 showed really well, but it was,
Mhm.
when we get into these things, drinking whiskey and nerding out the way we do, we just can't settle for neutered, chill filtered 43% whiskey.
Yeah.
And I think when you're looking at a core bottle at a higher price point with those attributes, it's a lot easier to look at something like this and go, yeah, that's reasonable.
Yeah. And speaking of neutered 43% ABV whiskey, let's go on to whiskey number 2.
Evan, that was a very romantic kind of segue. Like
You're welcome.
you're gonna damn it with faint praise before we even
That's
get
right.
Oh.
No, it's whiskey number 2. If you guys have cracked it already, it is Benromach 21-year-old.
Oh.
Probably the only bad thing I can say about it is 43% alcohol. It would be nice to see it a little bit higher, but it was a fun one to put in the lineup, and one that Andrew really gunned to put in there for a good reason. Because if you go back, and I was looking back through our whiskey calendars, this is either the first or second time we've had a Benromach in the KWM calendar, I think.
Definitely the second.
Yes, because I think the first one might have had. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I'm confident about that is that we had the Benromach 10 in like one of the
Minis.
first editions in a 50 ml bottle.
Yeah.
And I remember because it was before they changed to the current packaging. Like, actually, it might have been 2 packaging changes ago. It might have been in the tube with the brown kind of label, like that.
Yeah, with that was the copper colored tube, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The tin tube. But
Benromach 21. God.
yeah. It's Benromach is a distillery that we are well overdue in showcasing in the whiskey calendar. We've had single casks that like have just come and gone so fast that we wouldn't have managed to get one in on the last calendar. It was just in between us having bottles to actually run through or use for something like this. But it's a distillery that kind of reminds me of Highland Park in a lot of ways. It's kind of like a split between Highland Park and Springbank. Not to say that it isn't its own thing. It's a really unique sort of old school throwback Speyside distillery wise, where they're harkening back to a style that it just is not made in the region anymore.
Well, I think, we've talked a lot about Benromach in other tastings before. I think it's no secret we're fans. The distillery was reopened by Gordon MacPhail in 1998 after 5 years of restoration. And one of the things I think that when you follow companies like Gordon MacPhail for a while, you figure out is that they just don't rush anything. If they're going to do something, they do it right. They take the time to do it right. I mean, in a way, they're kind of going through that right now with the renovations of their famous shop in Elgin, which is like way behind budget and or way over budget and way behind in terms of timeline. Like I think it's almost a year behind now in its restoration work. But it's because they don't cut corners. They do things right, and they make the sort of decisions that companies that are owned by multinationals that pay dividends with shareholders and annual meetings don't have to put up with. I mean, they can get away with making decisions that will be like expensive up front, but will pay dividends down the line. They don't have to cut those kind
Absolutely.
of corners. And I think that's what really sets them apart, because they didn't build a brand new modern distillery with Benromach when they reopened it, because it was gutted. They had to start from scratch effectively. I think other than the washbacks, that was the only thing that was left. They decided they were going to build something, as you said, Evan, more traditional, harkening back to an era when whiskey was made differently. Like, they're one of a handful of distilleries that uses both brewers and distillers yeast, and I can't emphasize how important that is. I mean, it is, you know, the base thing of your distillate is that fermentation. All the flavors that you're going to create start in that fermentation, and then from that point on, you're just refining and polishing them. And so if you've got a really good distillation or fermentation with, you know, yeasts and longer fermentation times like they have at Benromach, that's your base building blocks that everything else gets built upon. And if you do that right, you can make something great. And I think, you know, if you've ever thought that like a lot of distilleries, especially Speyside or Highland ones, taste somewhat indistinguishable from each other, it's because they tend to use the same yeast strains and they tend to have the same relatively short fermentations. And that's the biggest reason why a lot of them taste so similar.
Yeah, yeah, everything in your modern distilleries, or at least your modern sort of factory-sized distilleries, is built for convenience, not innovation, and not just convenience, but to pump out product as fast and as efficiently as possible, which unfortunately doesn't necessarily make the most characterful single malt whiskey at the time or all the time. The cool thing about this 21 is, like, you're talking about fermentation time, and if you've been in a distillery with some big wooden washbacks or metal washbacks and smelled the fermentation going on, there is that sour, beery, yeasty grain funk kind of going on in the background on this, even after 21 years, which is remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Before I get onto the flavor of it, because I mean, I love how kind of wild and funky this is, because this is quite a funky whiskey. I think the last thing to talk about here quickly is oak. Gordon MacPhail only puts Benromach into first fill bourbon and first fill sherry casks, and their first fill sherry casks are the best you can buy as far as seasoned sherry casks go. And I know every whiskey company says that, but the one where it is true, and they don't tell you it's the best. They just tell you that they have very specific specifications. But it is the highest standard. They have a higher standard than Macallan. Macallan seasons their casks for roughly 6 months. Gordon MacPhail's minimum, I believe, is 3 years. Like the minimum seasoning and sherry. And not just that, the other stat that I love is that they actually specify a thicker stave of oak. They want a thicker cask so that it's tighter, so that it slows maturation, so that it's going to mature the whiskey better in the longer term. They do things that most companies can't afford to do because they're not answerable to anybody but themselves. And their mantra for 4 generations now is, what we do today is not for us, but for our kids and our grandkids. And big companies can't think that way. What they do is for their shareholders, and it's for the next quarter. It's not for 30, 60, 90 years from now. And I think that's why they're so interesting. And I was going to say, this is barnyardy, and I love it.
Big time.
It's the best kind of barnyardy. There's like, you know, fresh hay with a bit of like freshly dumped manure on it. And it's fruity. Like, it, you know, maybe there's an orchard nearby, or they're making cranberry jelly or crabapple jelly. But it's got this really nice barnyardy funk to it.
Yeah. What do you think, Harmony?
I was thinking a silly joke in my head that you can really smell the good oak on this. But you really can, like, there is a nice toastiness to it, and like vanilla, and the smoke is quite mild on the smell, but the palate's where it gets you, but not in an overpowering way. Just it's there, and It's a long finish. It's really nice.
Well, I think the reason why the nose is so soft and maybe understated is because of that ABV. Like if it
Mhm.
was at 46 or a little higher, I think you would get more of it leaping out of the glass. But I think one thing, and we do, let's admit it, we do shit on 40 and 43% a lot as far as bottling strengths. But not everybody who bottles at 40 and 43 chill filters the same
Yeah.
way. So even though this is 43%, Gordon MacPhail does only a very mild chill filtration as opposed to an aggressive chill filtration. So there's still a lot of the natural oils there. And I think you pick that up on the palate, but maybe not as much on the nose. But I bug Richard about this all the time. I would love to see this at 46%. I think it would be an even better whiskey than it already is.
Yeah, I agree. What I would say to tag on Harmony, especially is with the oak notes, is one thing that even at 43%, that the 10-year-old and the 15 and the 21 from Benromach have going so for them is balance. Like they all have a balance, but they all show rather differently from each other. Like they've got the same DNA, but the 10 is probably the most robust of those of the trio, with a bit more of a bold smoke and wood note coming through. The 15 is the softest of the bunch, but has this elegance and complexity behind it. And then the 21, you almost get the best of both worlds, at least on this first batch.
Well, we talk about this in our other tastings when we're doing Benromach, like especially after 20 years, the 20-plus-year-old ones in bourbon have this waxy, clean smoke profile that's very reminiscent of Brora. And the sherried ones taste more like Springbank. And I was just thinking this while you were talking, Evan, is that this kind of tastes like if you were to make a swamp mix of Springbank and Brora. That's what it kind of tastes like. It's got like the waxy honey and that clean smoke from Brora, but it's also got the funk, that oiliness, and a bit of almost a, I don't know, like this sort of slightly dirty Campbellton edge to it, which I really like too.
Yeah, great whiskey.
Yeah.
It's a crowd pleaser. Did we even put that up on the screen? I don't think we did.
No, if you wanted to share it, well, everybody's getting number 3 ready if they haven't already.
While we're doing that, so and this is one that we maybe don't always have a ton of stock in. I believe we've got it. Yeah, we do have it in stock. But if we ever run out, this is something that's almost always available. $2.60 a bottle. So there we go, guys. We started off the first tasting with 2 whiskeys north of 250. So just knocking it out of the park tonight. And then I think we're off to something really different, Evan.
Yeah, absolutely. So our first 2 whiskeys are both peated. We've gone up in age from 18 to 21-year-olds old. We're actually going up in age again for whiskey number 3, which is 30 years old. But this is a vastly different style of whiskey than the 2 single malts we've had before, because although this comes from Scotland, it is a blended grain whiskey, not a single malt. So 30 years old blended grain from that boutique whiskey company. And this is another one of the bottles that we've kind of fallen in love with. I know I have, I think Harmony has as well, both because it's so delicious and also the price on this is absolutely fantastic for a 30-year-old bottling.
So the boutique stuff, which we've been working with for a long time now, we do tastings, we go through them, and we always admit like they're great whiskeys. But what's really been a struggle for, I think, Canadian consumers, but not just Canadian, other markets as well, the 500 ml bottles just don't resonate with people. And I think the labels, as cute as they are and often funny as they are with all these little hidden Easter eggs, just go over a lot of people's heads. And this is part of a new core range they released of 700 mils. I think the others might be down here. 2 of them are down there. You can see there's a Canadian whiskey with a moose and a 12-year-old mystery Speyside whiskey. This new range that they did, I think, illustrates really well what they're doing, but moving away from the single cask side of things. These are batch bottlings. They're going to be available more continuously. But I think what people have struggled with the boutique is they don't see the value in them, because maybe it's the size, maybe it's the fact that they haven't disclosed where it's from. But the whiskeys we've had from them have been excellent quality and priced very fairly. And their core range stuff is ridiculously good value. Oh,
Tom has a side note here, question. Angus's 1920s blender, super nosing glass I get, but classic Glencairn versus Copita versus the slight variants, Bugatti Catch Kronos. How does this matter? I don't know what that is.
Angus is 19 super nosing glass. I'm just wondering if he's saying that are those the different notes that he gets? I mean, or why does the shape of glass matter? I mean,
Yeah,
if we're basically talking about that, I'll pull one of these over. I mean, I think this is the glass he's talking about, and I think these are actually Surge's glasses, or not the Surge, Secunders from the
Secunders,
Whiskey
yeah.
Exchange. So the reason these things work for nosing, especially old whiskeys, is that they trap the aroma in the glass. That's why it's kind of tapered in, but that large surface area allows for more oxidation. So you're getting more oxidation, more evaporation, but then you're trapping it. The reason most whiskey glasses are tulip shaped like this is that it keeps the nose, it keeps the aroma in there, but at the same moment you go to sip it, it's kind of funneling the aroma right to your nostrils, because most of what your palate interprets as taste is still coming from your nose. So hopefully that helps clear that up. But these glasses, I think, they're not ideal for drinking from. I mean, I'm not going to pour myself a dram of something really tasty and drink it from this, because you almost have to get your head upside down in order to get the last drops out of it.
Yeah.
But
You're
if
supposed to put your mouth right around the
right
top of
around,
the glass.
and
Yeah.
then like it's basically like a keg stand. Is that what you're describing, Evan?
Mm-hmm.
They're great glasses for nosing. They're not that great for enjoying. I know Kurt loves these Copita style. Personally, I like the Glencairn, like the heavy cut crystal Glencairns for drinking. But the reason they're shaped like that is to kind of maximize your ability to pick up aromas from the spirit.
Mhm.
So where were we with this? We were still talking about the boutique grain. So
Yeah.
$122. Evan, do you want to tell people about what makes this different? Because this isn't a single malt. This is a different style of whiskey they might not be familiar with.
Yeah, so when you're talking about grain versus malt, malt whiskey and single malt whiskey, especially based out of Scotland, to be classified as a single malt Scotch, it has to be 100% malted barley ran through a pot still. With grain whiskey, typically you're not using a pot still at all. You're going for something that's far more efficient, which is a continuous still. That's just meant to pump out vast amounts of alcohol over a lot shorter period of time, and meant to pretty much take whatever volume grain you can throw at it. Doesn't have to be malted. You don't have to do that part of the process at all. Corn and wheat are probably the most predominantly used grains in Scotland when it comes to making grain whiskeys, just because they offer higher alcohol, especially corn. But it definitely changes the profile, and especially for me, it changes the texture, where you almost do get this oily viscosity that makes me think of like a corn whiskey or bourbon on the palate here. Boutique is kind of sexing this thing up in a way where they've taken it from what were probably remarkably plain casks, and they've finished some of the whiskey at least in octaves that once held sherry, that give it like a really concentrated sherry note over a short period of time. So you're getting a bit more of that sherry note in with the whiskey as well. Leads to those really nice toffee and butterscotch notes that are sort of complementary to that grainy, oily style as well.
If you could somehow aerosolize like Flintstone vitamins, that's what this smells and
Yeah.
tastes like to me. But there's comments about the acetone or about like nail polish remover. One of the things with grain whiskey is that it does have kind of a volatile chemical or like industrial almost feel to it. And that I mean essentially is the same. You find that in a lot of vodkas as well. Like the best way to think about grain whiskey is it's almost vodka, but then put into an oak barrel to mature or to age. And over very long periods of time, it can pick up things from the cask, even if the cask is very tired and old, but it's also slowly oxidizing and becoming a little fruitier. So, grain whiskey, if you like it, it can be a real treat. It's not often as complex as malt whiskey. In fact, it's usually
Yeah.
not. But for value, for older whiskeys, it often can be hard to beat. And
Yeah.
I'd say the other thing that comes across, Evan, is they often can be, maybe not this one, but others can be very rum-like. Like there's
Yes.
quite strong similarities to aged rum.
Mhm. Well, another good sherry cask grain that we've come across recently, at least Harmony and I have, and actually Andrew, I know Andrew's had the Canadian Club 15, um, which I think is bottled at 42 and change or something like that. But they just released an 18-year-old Canadian Club, both of them quite sherry for Canadian whiskeys. But the 18-year-old's bottled at 58%, which is pretty impressive. Really good bottling on it in its own right, and another really good value if you like this style.
Well, I think Canadian Club, like a lot of brands, is trying to figure out how to position their whiskeys in an ever competitive, if not like oversaturated market. And like here you go, you've got the 15-year-old, the invitation sherry, which I think was a step in the right direction. But then I think with the 18,
Yes,
they've knocked it out of the park because again, this is a company that's trying to figure out what the consumers want rather than again telling them what they want. And I think with that 18, it's still kind of a hard sell because people I think devalue Canadian whiskey a fair
absolutely.
bit. And there are some legitimate reasons why they might have done that for a while, but there are
Mhm.
some great products out there, even from those big brands, and they are getting better. And they're going to have to if they want to stay relevant. Is the reality.
Well, and you mentioned repositioning themselves too, and another thing that they have done is reposition themselves geographically, where for years and years and years, Windsor, Ontario was the home of Canadian Club. If you could look at the bottle of the 15 and the 18 specifically, and probably the 100% rye is the same thing now. Canadian Club headquarters is essentially Calgary, Alberta, where they don't full out say it, but most of this would be whiskey coming from Alberta distillers at this point.
Yeah. Which uses rye, but they use a column still. So
Yeah, they can strip everything out if they want. Yeah.
yeah. And it's a really bizarre one too, because it's a horizontal column still. So
Yep.
instead of going up, the still goes sideways, which is kind of bonkers, but it's a very cool place to visit, but also dystopian. If
Yep.
you're a movie producer and you're ever scouting for places to film something dystopian, I'd say the Ogden part of Calgary would do fairly well for that.
Well, even the inside of the distillery could be like some weird dystopian sci-fi where you got a bunch of people walking around in hard hats, and then this square room in the center of it that's all glass with a bunch of people in lab coats looking out, essentially.
Well, Evan, you've been there and you've seen this. They have
Yeah.
the most bizarre contraption for moving casks around, and it's like a crawler. It gets above the casks that are on, I guess, what do we want to call it? Like a metal pallet, and then it picks them
Mhm.
up from above and then drives away with them. Like I've never seen one of those anywhere else, and it is
Yeah.
the first time you see it, it's almost unsettling because it's driving around fast with these casks that weigh hundreds and hundreds of pounds filled
Yeah.
with liquid.
Probably some sort of inspiration for the human pods in the Matrix in some shape or form.
Possibly, maybe. Incidentally, quick little plug for those of you in Calgary. There is a beautiful new distillery slash restaurant cocktail bar that just opened
Yes.
that overlooks Alberta distillers, but also Canna Maltings, where a lot of the barley is malted for craft brewers in places like the US. It's called True Wild. The stills haven't been commissioned, but it's an absolutely beautiful distillery. I've been there. The food's excellent. They've got some great cocktails too. It's worth checking it out.
Very cool. Okay, shall we on to number 4?
Yeah, let's go on to number 4. I don't even know what is number 4.
So number 4 is our first brand new distillery release in the whiskey calendar. Maybe there'll be more, maybe there won't be. But this is the the first new distillery whiskey from Islay, from
Oh.
Ardnahoe Distillery. This is the Ardnahoe 5-year-old inaugural release at 50% alcohol.
This is actually my first time trying this.
Cool.
I knew we put this in the calendar, but I couldn't remember where. So yeah, I'm excited to try this one.
Nice. In hindsight, after doing the tasting notes, we probably should have put this 5 and put the next one before it, but we'll see if that
Oh,
still holds up or not.
I'm sure we'll be okay.
Yeah. So Ardnahoe is a young distillery. Was it founded in 2017, if I remember correctly? So
There's a
or
really
maybe
good
2018.
article on the website if you want to read it. It's like got all the
Uh,
details. It's really
Was
I
great.
don't have the time to read
Was it
stuff like
written by
that,
a guy named
unfortunately.
Evan?
Yeah. But it is owned by, like Benromach Distillery is owned by Gordon MacPhail. Ardnahoe
No.
Distillery is owned by
Wait.
another independent bottler called Hunter Lang, uh, which is the Hunter Lang as a result of another company splitting into two, which was Douglas Lang. It was a split brought on by the two brothers that owned the Lang Distillery or the Lang company after their father passed away, and eventually they decided they couldn't stand each other to even be in the same building, um, or had another generation that they wanted to pass stuff on to. On both sides. So it could be a bit of both. But Hunter Lang went off and founded Ardnahoe Distillery. This is their first release of Ardnahoe single malt whiskey officially.
Yeah.
And there is another one that is out now that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah. Evan, I had to look closely at this. I just thought we would put that on there because
Mhm.
Ardnahoe is probably rivaling Kalila for one of the best still room views. For the
Yes.
longest time, Kalila had it. And when I looked at your blog post, it's like, Jesus, did Evan use the architect's rendering of Ardnahoe?
It almost looks like it, doesn't it?
It almost looks like it, but this is a beautiful photo. You've got the Paps of Jura in behind there. It
Yeah.
is a really, really cool photo. Because you and I, we went there, and I think the
Mhm.
interesting thing is we'd both been to Ardnahoe. On that
Yeah.
same trip, we'd been to Lag, which was another new distillery with just, not even a year-old spirit at that time. And I remember you and I we were very underwhelmed by the distillate at Ardnahoe, which, to be
Yeah.
fair, I've heard has changed a bit. Like we went there right after they opened. Um, we didn't think it was bad. It just, compared to the spirit that was coming off of Lag, it just seemed kind of boring. But
Yeah.
if this is some of it, it's matured really well.
Yeah. And they do deal with like they've intentionally put in like one piece of technology that is pretty wild. Like they have the longest line arms in Scotland, if I remember correctly. And it's also they can get it out the front of the building and put the
And into some
whiskey
wine clubs.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like an underwhelming visit overall, where the spirit was just okay, and like the people there were super friendly and really nice, and the food was pretty good as well, but it was not well populated with people in there at the time either, and just kind of felt big and empty.
Oh, I mean, you can tell it's young. Um, but it's juicy, it's malty.
Mhm.
There's some nice smoke and salt in there. Some nice white fruits, apple, pear, and a little bit of citrus as well. For 5 years old, this is a pretty decent ball line.
Absolutely. It's got a harder edge than a lot of Kilchoman young stuff has, I find, where there's a bit more, maybe more salt and a bit more minerality coming through. Um, but it like even the finish on it is just pleasant and nice and really well put together.
It is. It's got a little bit of Kalila in there. Like there's a little bit of that sort of bacon scallop thing going on, but it is a different profile to it. And I could see maybe like if Kalila and Kilchoman had a love child, this would be
Mhm.
in that wheelhouse. Harmony, what do you think of this?
I think it's fine. Yeah, it's a fine little whiskey. I got a kick out of the tasting notes that this is the oldest 5-year-old ever child prodigy whiskey.
Yeah.
Um,
That is that an Evanism? Evan tasting.
No,
no, this is
my writing is not that good. That must be
Clinton
marketing right there.
Renata, I think.
So this is their marketing. They called it a child prodigy whiskey.
No, that's what one of the people in the chat call it.
Oh,
Oh,
Clinton.
Clinton Renata said it.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I thought that was just very sweet review.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's fine. I think you nailed all the notes for me. Um, it- yeah, I don't know. It's fine. I look forward to
Yeah.
seeing what they do. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the
absolutely.
thing. When you're spoiled, you want something a little more mature. But I think like the DNA in this is great.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now we could
There's
go
like a
down.
little floral, like licoricey kind of like
Mhm.
pink pepper, green cracked pepper kind of thing happening in the middle. That's really nice.
Well,
Mhm.
Craig's got a good note there. The mint tea, like it's definitely got like a
Yeah.
nice
Yeah.
cool mint or spearmint note to it. Green
Mhm.
pepper or jalapeno from Jeff. Um, you know, the thing is, if you like peat, like, and you want it to be like robust and big, you have to drink it young.
Mhm.
And we see that like the reason Kilchoman McCure Bay is still popular is because people want it to be heavily peated. Like the reason people drink Lafroig Quarter Cask at roughly 6, 7 years of age is because they want that big blast of medicinal
Yeah.
peat.
Mhm.
So I think there's a market out there, and this is the interesting thing, like in a market of oversaturation, too many distilleries, too many bottlings. But the interesting thing is, Evan, like, we do tastings or with certain brands, and there's never enough peat.
Yeah.
And, you know, as far as a safe bet, like building a distillery on Islay and releasing a peated whiskey, you'll probably be able to sell boatloads of it at 5 years of age. Whereas if you're somewhere else in Scotland and it's not peated, you're probably going to have a harder time.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine trying to build another distillery in Speyside right now?
Well, what about on Islay? I mean, that
Yeah.
place is starting to get a little overcrowded.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you look at all the world distilleries that have been closing down, I mean, this month alone, it's
Hmm.
it's pretty
Yeah.
scary. And I mean, it's not so
Yep.
much happening in Scotland, but it's kind of, you need to take a moment and we realize like how saturated it is. And we talked already too
Yeah.
much about overpricing the market, but it's something to be aware of as well. And we have to be better at being consumers at what we purchase so that it gets
Mhm.
better for everyone.
Mhm. Any other thoughts on the Ardnahoe here, guys, before we move on?
No,
No, I'm excited.
I do hope we see the next release, which is called Infinite Lock, which I think is meant to be a regular until they have something else. Can't remember if that one's at 50% alcohol as well. I kind of hope it is. Hopefully they just stick to that old malt cask strength because it's a good strength to put in a new release on.
Well, I'd be surprised if they bottled it below.
46.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if, I mean, there's nothing in their portfolio that's really bottled below that. I've just gone onto their website. Jeff Surge has probably beaten me there. I've got to go through this age verification thing. But it is bottled at 50%. There you go.
Nice.
And I believe Lee told us this is going to drop early in the new year. So uh,
Cool.
we've been lucky. We've sold through our allocation of Ardnahoe a couple times over. He keeps topping us up. But when that finally is sold out on the wholesale level, they're going to release the Infinite Lock. And I guess my one thought on this, and it's encouraging to see here, I think their price is £55. Um, I'd like to see this come in close to $80. I mean, I think that's a fair
That
price for
would be nice.
5-year-old Islay whiskey, other other than a first release. I think that's a fair place to put it.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
as long as it's this good, if
Yeah.
not, then it's got to be less.
So on to number 5. We're sticking to Islay and we're going to the second youngest distillery on Islay. which was the youngest distillery on Islay to have whiskey for years and years and years. This is Kilchoman, and this is our 10-year-old 100% Islay single cask that Scotch guy had bottled for his 20th anniversary at the shop.
Yeah, lots of so this is, I guess we would call this one of the ego casks. Is that
Yeah.
fair to
Well,
say?
they were good enough not to put your face on it, so maybe it doesn't truly
But
count.
they put his name, they give him a shout out, like
They
That's
did
right.
give me
his
they did give me a
celebrity
shout out.
name.
Well,
Yeah.
and this one came about because I think Anthony asked me if I wanted a Kilchoman cask for my 20th anniversary, and obviously he didn't have anything that old. The distillery opened a couple years after I started at Kensington Wine Market. But the opportunity to bottle 100% Islay, which is my favorite profile of Kilchoman. For those who don't know, Kilchoman makes their regular whiskey, which is peated, I think, around 55 ppm. The 100% Islay is usually about 20 to 25, somewhere in that range, but it varies because it's floor malted. And even more special than that, it's barley they grow in the fields around the distillery. They malt it on their own traditional floor maltings. We say traditional, but I mean, it's a shed with a concrete floor, which maybe is not traditional, but the method is traditional. You've got birds flying in and out of there all the time. Then
That makes it traditional.
that makes it traditional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or the birds and rodents. Yeah.
The birds and the rodents. And then they make, mature, and bottle the whiskey on site. So it's one of the few, if not the only distillery in Scotland that is producing farm to bottle whiskey where the barley never leaves the distillery before it's put into bottle and shipped away. I know there's a few others that kind of come close to that, like Springbank malts to bottle, but they don't grow the barley in the town of Campbellton, thank God.
No.
Um,
True.
that
And
would
how
be
cool
problematic.
how cool is it to have a combine with your company logo on it when it comes to making whiskey?
That's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I mean, you could ask Anthony about that because I think in the early days it was a nightmare because they didn't own the farm initially. They eventually had to buy it out. And the farmer was originally producing barley for them, but they had a falling out with them and it became a disaster. Like I think they were both having access issues on each other's property. So eventually they managed to buy the farmer out and they now own that land. But now I think if you were to ask him, yeah, it's probably pretty cool to have a combine with your logo on it.
Well, that's better than my theory. My theory was he bought the combine and put the logo on and then was like, shit, I better buy the farm too.
Well, thank God he didn't buy the farm.
Yeah. Just Rockside Farm. He purchased Rockside. Yeah. So 100% Islay is my personal favorite style of Kilchoman, especially in ex-bourbon casks. This is the second 10-year-old 100% Islay that we've had bottled for the shop. And 100% Islay ex-bourbon just gets this beautiful creaminess to it that is just, it's almost unmatched when it comes to Islay whiskeys.
Oh man, the palate on that is awesome. I mean, the Ardnahoe is good. This is great. Like they're not even really in the same league with each other. And Evan, I think you were right. Like even if you second guessed yourself, like even though the Ardnahoe is more heavily peated, this has just got so much more character, flavor. The vanilla from the oak, from those ex-bourbon barrels is bursting through. Yeah, I think this whiskey works really well at the tail end of this lineup tonight.
Well, and to be fair, it's also twice as old as the Ardnahoe, so.
But half is heavily peated and twice the age. So you might think the peat will be so rough and raw in that Ardnahoe that it should go back at the tail end. But really that sort of tarry peat character is, really lingering quite well in the finish. Like it's bold, nice citrus tones in there, melons. It's going tropical. I mean, this is what I'm going to be looking for in Kilchoman in about 5 years, are these, 2005 era 20-something Port Ellens that were tropical and peaty. Like I think that's what Port Ellen's going to taste like, or Kilchoman's going to taste like in 5 years' time.
Yeah,
That would
absolutely.
be great.
They just need to get to the age where they can just toss it in refill casks and just let it lie.
Yeah. It's beautiful. This is Kilchoman was like the first distillery where I was like, fangirl, this is my distillery. I've always had a love and appreciation for Kalila, but the Kilchoman barley profile has always been something that I've enjoyed. Yeah. And I think I would just like to say this has been a super fun tasting. For all of you who don't like peat, hang in there.
This is the
There's
peatiest
so
of-
much more in
Yeah.
this December tastings than just the kick in the pants of peat that we've given you today. So
When Evan and I started planning the lineup way back in mid to late
October.
September,
Yeah.
To
It
our
was
credit,
September. It was
he
like
was-
September
he
30th.
was trying to push me on this
Yeah.
before there was bandwidth for it. So I'll take the blame for that. But we wanted to balance the tastings so that there was only a couple of peated whiskeys in each instead of 4 in one. So there was
That's
only,
what I was telling people. Like,
so that there would be at least one 20 to 25-year-old single malt in each. We wanted to make them somewhat equal. The
Mhm.
problem is we also wanted to put the whiskeys in there that we wanted to talk about because we wanted to put the best whiskeys forward and have the best lineup possible. And I think that dictated things. And if you found tonight's lineup too peaty, it gets better.
Yeah.
But maybe by the next tasting, you'll be like, wow, I like peat now.
yeah.
Yeah.
They forced me.
Or where's the peat? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Clinton Renata, I think we essentially just made this lineup for you when it comes down to it. I apologize for whiskey number 3 that had no peat in it. But I mean, you gotta put something in for everybody else there too. But yeah, the other part of the sort of trying to the weights and balances of putting a kit together like this, especially since we've tried to make it a tasting that's sort of equal all the way through. Andrew had his mandate of what he wants to see in each kit, which I thought was really cool. But then beyond that, there was also trying to balance the price point so that there isn't a tasting kit that is way more or way less expensive than any of the others. And that's where something like this, where we get 3 or 4 out of the 5 whiskeys being peated in some shape or form.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is when we did all the math, the difference from the most expensive tasting kit to the least expensive one, the difference in price was like somewhere around $50, but that wasn't on an individual kit. That was based on the whole production. So the way it worked out, it actually worked out really well. But it also I mean, ultimately when we do this, the reason we like to do this is not just something to shill and sell. This is something for us to promote things that we're excited about, that we love, to get people excited about them, to showcase things that maybe don't get enough attention, and for us to be able to share things that we're passionate and excited about. And I think that's where we went with this year's calendar, not an advent calendar.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't launch it, I don't think, but maybe I can.
Poll?
Yeah.
But are we going to
I'll
do poll
put
or are we
that
going
up.
to do a speed round, or do we do a speed round?
No, we're not doing a
Let's
speed
do-
round.
No?
Oh, I'm not staying. I need to eat.
Okay, Harmony's got to
Okay,
go.
that's fair. Yeah.
We're sorry to lose you, but I mean, some of us love the speed round, Harmony. For some of us, it's the highlight.
Well,
of the
you
taste.
told me there wasn't a speed round, so I drank mine. So even if there was, I'd be going off the smell of the glass.
It's possible I said that, though I have zero recollection of it.
But it's
we
okay.
Probably should go and eat something.
Yeah, but I also did, just to clarify to everyone, I only poured quarter ounces. So I didn't get the same full pour as you did.
That's fair.
Well, Harmony, it was
Thank
a
you all
pleasure
for
having you
having me.
on. Hopefully
Yeah.
hopefully you'll join us for most, if not all, of the remaining ones. We'll see how
Yeah, I think I tried to plan your dates around the or your shifts around the tasting so that you could be in on these.
That's good.
Cool.
Because
It's
I
a date
may or
night,
may
guys.
not be in on the third one, but we'll talk about that on Monday.
Ooh. Well, you better
Okay.
be in on that one, otherwise it's going to be the all Evan hour, which
Oh, that would
is
be
going to make it
great.
pretty dreary. Yeah,
If that's the case, I'm
I'm
gonna
pretty
just
sure we can
mute.
find a sidekick for you.
yeah.
Right
But
on.
no, I'll
I'll
be
just
here.
I'll read out my blog post.
I think this is the moment Jeff has been waiting for.
Yeah,
That's
Jeff,
right.
we're calling you in.
It's getting called up from the minors to the big leagues.
Yeah.
All right, Evan, speed rounds.
Yes.
We're back to the
Okay.
Signatory Orkney.
Yeah. So the after having all that peat, the peat is not as visible in this, but
Oh.
it still has the coastal notes, which is nice. The sherry's there as well.
Sherry and fruit.
Yep.
The sherry's much more forward now. Almost
Yep.
a little on the dumpy side of things. Like lots of dried dark fruits, like fruit leather, chocolate, nice soft
Yep.
peat.
Still has a earthy, peppery hit at the end though, just to make sure that you know that it's Highland Park-esque, which is nice.
Mhm. All right. What's next? Benromach 21?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's like going into an old shoe shop now. Like there's a guy in the back gluing them together. There's brand new polished shoes out front. There's old shoe. Like it's just, this is
Yep.
so leathery to me now.
He's also eating like not the small shredded wheats, but like the big wheat cereal where you get the big chunk of wheat husk that you put in there and put in
I think
milk.
the guy might be Amish too, because I think he's got a horse in the back as well.
Well, the cereal is made by Quakers, even if he isn't a Quaker
Oh, he's a
himself.
Quaker.
Yeah.
Probably makes good fireplaces though, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, no, oh, Graintown, number 3. I
Yep.
mean, this is the, and now for something completely different in this lineup.
That's right. Yeah, the foot, you can see the foot coming down over the other whiskeys that we've tried so far.
It's a little plasticky now. Sweet
Mhm.
honey, nice fruits.
Yeah. Yeah, Boutique doesn't say this, but this was partially finished in a Ziploc bag.
Food safe though. It was a food safe Ziploc bag.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're good. We're
Yeah,
good.
no black plastic. Don't worry. No black plastic in this at all.
Oh man, go on to the Ardnahoe now. It's like you're in a mud flat digging for clams.
Well, that is going muddy. It's got these just hints of bourbon and sherry that are in there too from the casks.
Oh, toasty, malty, some nice
Mhm.
peat. You know, the profile's a bit off. Like it's very malt forward, much more malt forward than anything I've had from Kalila, but I think that's the closest thing I can approximate it to profile wise, which is unusual. You'd think with the way their still setup is, their worm tubs, that you'd get something quite different, but
Yeah.
it is
It's
Kalila.
kind of it's giving us another in between. Like I find that Kalila and Stoisha, the most recent Peter Boonhaven, kind of run hand in hand. This is kind of running closer to Stoisha, where you get the really grain forward style of it.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then back to Kilchoman. Oh man, the mouthfeel on that, sweet, fruity, creamy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I love. There's not an Islay whiskey that I don't love, but if I could only have one style of Islay whiskey for the rest of my life, I'd probably be 100% Islay from Kilchoman.
yeah. I'd be hard pressed to disagree with you. Uh, all right, you need me to fire up the poll?
Mm-hmm.
All right, 3 questions. We love it when Evan does 3 questions because one of them is not serious. One of them is cheeky. So what have we got here? You've got your first favorite and your second favorite from tonight's lineup. And then Evan's cheeky third question is, for this series, was there too much peat? And then you'll have to read through his sarcastic answers and choose the one that best, I suppose, meets your emotions. So Evan,
Yeah.
while people are voting, while they're exercising their right to free speech and choice, what were your 2 favorites from tonight's lineup?
free speech and multiple choice. Uh, Toughie. I am going to go with the Signatory Orkney as number two, the silver medal, and then I really like that boutique grain, given its stats of being 30 years old and so
Mhm,
well priced. But I'm going to go with the Kilchoman.
mhm.
Even with a lineup of peat, that just shows so well that 100% Isla cask.
So I love that you allowed yourself, even though you didn't declare it a third choice, you allowed yourself
Yeah,
three choices, because I was gonna say we should let ourselves have a third
that's
favorite.
right.
Um, we have the ability. Um, I'm similar to yours. My favorite is the Kilchoman. I just think it's the best all around whiskey in the lineup. My second favorite is the Benromach. I love that funky old school vibe that it has. I desperately wish they bottled it at a higher ABV.
Hmm.
Um, but we don't have to worry about that because we have two single casks of Benromach coming in the new year. So that's okay. My third favorite is the Signatory Orkney. So I love seeing Highland Park get kind of unleashed, as it were.
Absolutely.
That is. So where
Right
are we
on.
at? 36 of 40. So four of you have yet to vote. We're going to give you about 30 seconds to a minute to do that. Some nice comments in there. Congrats to the Kensington team to pull off this not a calendar series. We appreciate that you're keeping up on this age-long tradition. We love doing this. I think it wouldn't have been quite the same if we hadn't done something like this year. Um, Shockingly, given all the number of boxes and labels and stickers involved, somehow this project is more cost effective than the calendars we built.
As
So
long as as long as you don't talk about man hours. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, man hours aside,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Or woman hours in this case,
we were
for
always going
sure.
to do something, and I'm glad we did this.
Yeah.
The hope is we'll be able to go back to doing our calendar, but I think, Evan, it's fair to say we won't go back to trying to source 50 mil bottles again, because
No.
the choice just isn't there. The industry's not bottling them. And for us, we would rather sell less of something that's better quality, that we're more proud of, that we're willing to stand behind, than more of something that we can do, but is,
Yeah.
the best we can do. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah, for
sums up
sure.
our feelings.
The upside of doing the mini bottles was we didn't have to pour them all, and it also gave everybody a slightly larger sample size because we are limited on the sample size we can pour under AGLC regs.
Mhm.
But the extreme upside of doing that this way is it is a 100% curated list. Like
Yeah.
this is us showcasing whiskey we want to showcase, and that is what makes it all the more special.
Yeah. Well, I think this goes down to, like, even with our tastings outside of this,
Hmm.
we put on the kind of lineups that we're excited to do because we think if we're excited about it, other people will be too. It's not
Yep.
just to tick a box, it's because we have something to say or we have something to showcase. And let's see how the results went tonight, Evan. I'm going to
Absolutely.
share them here. So the wiener, as it were, first favorite tonight, Signatory Orkney HP Sauce 18 year with the win. Kilchoman coming
Hmm.
in a respectable second, and then a three-way tie for third. How about that? I don't think that's ever happened
Cool.
before. Nobody got the participation medal in this tasting tonight, so that's or like, it was more of a badge, wasn't it? The
Hmm.
participation, it was a badge, not so much a medal. Second favorite in the lineup, the Kilchoman goes storming to the front. The Signatory Orkney remains in second place. So it was pretty clear what the two favorites were in the lineup tonight. Now, Evan, do you want to tell us about your what? Because I'll butcher them otherwise. You've got your choice
Yeah.
here for this series.
Yeah.
Was there too much peat?
Yeah. So the choices are, which got 0 votes, was way too much peat. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I'm glad that got 0 votes, and thank you for putting up with this, Pete,
Was that
because
inspired by one of your children?
no, but I'm pretty sure I hate it. I hate it. I hate it was said, it has been said by all children everywhere at some point.
Fair.
Uh, what one was just enough peat. The peat on that Benromach barely shows, and I agree with that. And then coming in second with 11 votes was not enough peat. All 6 bottles should have had been peated for this 5 bottle set.
Oh, there you go. Well, you can't please them all, as they say.
Exactly.
Well,
We did a
I thought
decent
this was
job
a
at
great
trying.
lineup. Sorry, Evan?
We did a decent job at trying.
We did, yeah. I think this was a great lineup tonight. I hope the rest, although I'm pretty confident the rest of the lineups are pretty good here too, live
Yes.
up to this one moving forward. But we do have a lot of other bangers to look forward to in the tasting ahead. Anything else you want to share about this before we start winding down tonight's tasting?
No, other than I'll definitely have to go through the chat because I love boosting my own ego and looking at how many people enjoyed the blog posts. To those of you that actually take the time and read them, I truly appreciate it. I would write them anyways. I think this is my 6th year attempting to do them all, and I don't plan on stopping. Even if Andrew fires me, I'll have to put them up somewhere else. But
Under
it's
someone else's name.
exactly. It'll be a pseudonym at some point or something like that. But they're fun to do, and it allows me to kind of let off steam with putting in the dry humor and the silly jokes in there. So thank you for putting up with it.
Yeah, well, no, it's very good. Well, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Thank you for interacting with us. Hope you enjoyed them. If you didn't get an answer to a question you had, please feel to reach out to us at the shop or through our social media. Natalia will eventually ask us if she doesn't know how to answer the question.
And since Harmony's not here to stop you, we talked about the Signatory Highland Park. If you guys are interested in that bottle, it is around 300 or 310. I think we have 1 or 2 bottles that we're going to put back in inventory.
Believe it or not, I think we might have